call this meeting to order. Let's start with introduction of the zoning commission members and department staff. Nicole, we can start with you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Nicole Cromwell. I will be presenting the report to the zoning commission this evening. Monica Plecker is our Zoom coordinator this evening. She's in the back of the room. We have Jeanette Fee, who will be helping check people in person, and Robin Bartley, our clerk for this evening, who will be taking the minutes and answering phone calls from people who want to call in a comment. And that number is 237-6120.
And Jack, we can start down on your end with the zoning commission.
I'm Jack King.
I'm Greg McCall.
Trina White.
Mike Larson.
And Dan Brooks.
So at this point, we have an opportunity for public comment on any issue not on the agenda. That number again is 406-237-6120. If anyone would like to make a comment on any item not on the agenda for tonight. And we'll give it just a moment to catch up and see if anyone is calling in. No one calling in, so I think we can move to our regular business. Just so everyone knows, and by the way, even in the governor's order on face masks, he said if you're talking in a public speaking situation, you can take your face mask off so people can actually hear you. So I'm going to do that occasionally so I can actually be heard clearly. Nicole and I were just talking, I don't know if you heard that, but the first night we had kind of a single presentation with questions and comment after the whole presentation. Last night we had some natural breaks where we did that in between. I think for tonight we'll try that same approach on each section, and so that we don't save it all up for the end. So Nicole will kind of signal me on when she has finished and there's a natural break, and then we'll call for questions from zoning commission members, members of the public who are here presently after that, and then anyone who's calling in remotely or virtually at the end of that. And again, for anyone listening, if you during a section know that you want to call in, the sooner you do that, the better. You may be on hold for a while, but that way we'll make sure that we actually catch you. So with that, Nicole, if you would go ahead with your presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tonight we're going to cover the new commercial, mixed-use, industrial, and public zone districts that are proposed in the draft. This includes proposed section 27,400, 27,500, 27,600, and 27,1,000 for the uses and use standards in those districts. So I am going to share my screen. And start slideshow. Okay, so commercial and mixed-use, industrial, and public zones. We're going to go through these tonight, and we'll break occasionally when we reach a breaking point. But first, again, I want to emphasize that all of our work in the steering committee and the working groups is based on the 2016 Billings Growth Policy, and was a foundation for all of our work to ensure that we were following those guidelines given to us by the City Council in 2016. And in addition, the steering committee appointed by the City County Planning Board to help guide this project with staff and consultants also adopted guiding principles that we followed and through which every draft had to be looked at. So primarily in the commercial, mixed-use, public, and industrial zone districts, we're looking at options and context. We're looking at filling voids where we don't have a regulation already for a particular use, or we have too many, we need to split those up, and to ensure that we're supporting the prosperity of our community by encouraging businesses in our major sectors. So currently we have 19 commercial, mixed-use, downtown, industrial, or public zone districts. And those range everything from a residential professional zone that allows offices and some other uses in the residential professional that you wouldn't necessarily think of, such as beauty salons and gymnastics instruction. So that's the existing RP zone. Then we go up to neighborhood commercial, which takes all of the uses from residential professional and puts a few more on top of it. Then we have community commercial, which is we consider to be our kind of the most large zoning district because it allows so many uses. It allows everything from large apartment complexes to lumber yards and hardware stores and contractor facilities. So it has too wide of a range of uses in that zone district. Then we have highway commercial, which is more intense uses. Then central business district and Ebird. Those are kind of our base, our central core zoning districts. And I will tell you that neither one of those zoning districts is changing very much at all. We're making sure the use table and the use standards fit with those two zone districts. We have entryway zoning right now, which is around our interchanges for the interstate, both in the city and the county. And those consist of 4 different type of entryway zones. We have the South 27th Street corridor that goes basically from First Avenue South to the interstate along both sides of the South 27th Street. We have the medical corridor that runs from 6th Avenue North up to Poly Drive and from 27th to 30th, and was instituted to support the change from mostly a residential neighborhood to medical facilities, doctor's offices, hospitals, and that sort of thing. We have controlled and heavy industrial right now, and those are also staying very much like they are now, but we're changing their names a little bit. And then we have 1 public zone district. Our proposed lineup, we cut a couple zone districts down from 19 to 17, but we also eliminated entirely the South 27th Street corridor and the entryway zone districts, and we placed those properties into the new lineup of either a mixed-use zone or a heavy commercial zone, depending on where they were located and what types of uses were in those zone districts already. We also expanded some zones from just 1 type to more. For the public zone, for example, if you're next to Pioneer Park, which is zoned public, you expect 1 type of use and activity to be going on. But you could also live next to the landfill, which is zoned public, and that has an entirely different thing going on. So we thought that it would be better if we had 3 zone districts for public, so it was more predictable for areas of town and for uses. So as you can see, we changed up the lineup, and we consolidated some, and we expanded others. The community commercial, we created 3 zone districts out of that, and that was the corridor mixed use 1, the corridor mixed use 2, and the heavy commercial. And I'll go through each one of those to explain exactly how those divisions ended up. All right, so we'll just start off with the neighborhood office. And most of the neighborhood office zone districts are going to translate directly from the residential professional to the neighborhood office zone district. So this is where you have small office spaces. Sometimes they're actually within neighborhoods already. Sometimes they are along those transportation corridors, but for the most part, we pick those up as the residential professional and translate it to the neighborhood office. They're intended to be very walkable locations or drivable. You can drive to or walk to these locations. There will be some form requirements that we don't have now for residential professionals. So instead of minimum setbacks, we're having build to the street requirements. We're also looking at requiring parking to be dealt with in a different way than it is now. It's not all going to be front-loaded right off the street. It'll be side-loaded or rear parking and bring the building to the street. And that helps keep traffic speeds down. It helps people know what's going on in those buildings, and it's just a better urban form for office space in neighborhoods. Then we jump over to the mixed use, and we have the neighborhood mixed use is a district that we created that took some of the neighborhood commercial uses and then also some of the smaller retail uses and put them in together. It is intended to be very compatible with existing neighborhoods where you have places like Harper Madison, which used to be the 10th Avenue Market, which has existed in the same location for decades, but currently is zoned residential. So instead of keeping those as residential zones and putting them in a very risky place, we decided that let's create a district just for these types of uses, and let's put it in place where it exists and allow it to be used in the same way in future neighborhoods. So also it has the bring the building to the front, pull the parking to the side or to the back. And they're intended not to be very large lots or big developments. They're intended to just be generally single users or single businesses. And Mr. Chairman, I'm going to break here because the next jump up is to the corridors, and those are a different kind of animal. And so if you have questions on these two zone districts.
So, questions from any member of the commission at this point? Any comment from anyone in attendance at this point? Seeing neither of those, checking on anyone on any of the virtual, or at this time also, again, reminding you once again, I know this is redundant, but 406-237-6120. If anyone wants to comment, and we'll give it just a minute, Robin will signal me when we have or have not gotten any phone calls. Yes, if you would like to comment, you could just come up and give your name and address, please.
Thank you. My name's Blaine Poplar. I have a question or a comment regarding the new neighborhood office zoning, which I believe Nicole said that neighborhood commercial zoning will be switched to neighborhood office.
No, that would be residential professional would go to neighborhood office, but neighborhood commercial would go to either neighborhood mixed use or corridor mixed use one, depending on the location and uses.
Okay. So in the neighborhood commercial zoning previously, you were allowed to build multifamily properties. Will that be the case after we go to neighborhood mixed use?
Flip to the use table. In the neighborhood mixed use, in all the mixed use zone districts, you could do residential uses, but they have to be mixed in the same building with a commercial use. So it has to be behind the first 20 feet of a building or on an upper story of a building to be in those zone districts.
So I guess my comment would be if I had property zoned neighborhood commercial and I'd purchased it with the thought of maybe building multifamily on it, we now have this switch to the neighborhood mixed use. I think I'd feel like I've lost substantial value and flexibility in my property. And that's my comment.
Go ahead.
Just to address Blaine's question, we've mutually even been discussing a particular property that has this very situation on it. And I think as we get into this further, what we're going to find is that as developers and builders and so on look at some of these things, we may need to do some adjustments with some zone changing. But to some degree, I still think that neighborhood office, we've got some of those blanket switches that are just going to happen with the new code as they go into place. But looking at the adjacent properties and how they're being utilized currently will all speak to how that property can function. So I wouldn't be too alarmed that we're not going to still be able to do those types of things that you would want to do, such as some multifamily in a neighborhood mixed use or a CMU1 if that's what it had been. But really this fits based on this adjacencies now. Then, but we may have to do either in this first year, as we look at these new zones that have been applied over the old zones, maybe it's a housekeeping thing where it's just like, well, this isn't quite right now based on what's there, but so we could get some of those things changed that way. Otherwise, still have the zone change process.
I will also mention that people and property owners who emailed me, came in and talked to me, called me on the phone and said, I have this property, and I looked at the proposed zoning map, and I'm not going to be doing neighborhood mixed use or corridor mixed use. I'm going to be developing this as apartments or multifamily, and we've adjusted the map to reflect that choice to either an NX2 or an NX3. So that we made sure that where we knew things were going to be happening, that we adjusted the map before we adopted. It's just the ones that we don't know about, we don't know, so.
It sounds like you could be.
Okay. Another comment?
Schaefer? So I have a question. I just got a letter from somebody in my neighborhood, and we have a vacant building we're currently zoned residential professional, and the new zone, I believe, is going to be residential mixed use. Is that correct?
Well, there's neighborhood office or neighborhood mixed use. It could be one or the other, I'm not sure.
So what if they wanted to put an apartment there? Because you just a second ago, you said, well, we're going to change some that person wanted to put apartments here, so we're going to kind of add that label to it, is kind of the way I was hearing it.
If the existing zoning district, like neighborhood commercial or community commercial, allowed multifamily development, and they're only going to do multifamily development, then we would change it to a multifamily zone, the mixed residential zone districts.
So if the next door neighbor is an apartment
Right?
with more than 6 units, let's say,
Okay.
it'll be pretty easy for them to go to that, won't it?
Right, which would, if the existing neighbor
Mhm.
is, I don't know what the zoning is, I don't know what the place is.
It's
so-
on Alderson,
Okay,
1027 Alderson.
1127 Alderson. They are going to apply for a zone change,
And they did,
right? So
But
their
you just said-
application is coming to us now.
yes. But you just said that it would be pretty easy right now for us to just, you've already
But
told us. what you want.
residential professional does not allow multifamily, and that's why they're doing their zone change. To
So
a
the one,
multifamily zone.
so the apartment complex next door that is existing for 50 years, let's say, they're, I don't know what they're zoned, I'm getting to say
I think they're
multifamily.
multifamily, yeah.
But
yeah.
because because they're next door to that, is it gonna be easy for them to get that? Or how will we prevent that? We just can't have any more apartments. We're over it.
So you're talking about the property that's now going through a zone change?
Yeah, so
Okay.
there's the apartment complex, and then there's the empty building.
Right.
And then there's another building, if this one gets it, that building will turn into it too. It's kind of like a domino effect. Because there's gonna
You
be,
mean the bingo building?
yeah. I mean, if they don't make it through COVID, I mean,
Oh, well.
which I suspect could happen. I don't know, just hypothetically.
I don't know either, but generally, we take things one thing at a time. And just because one property gets a zone change doesn't mean an adjacent property can get one too. So it would all depend. The existing zone change that's coming through,
Mhm.
you need to get involved in that public hearing process and let the zoning commission know when they hear about it at a public hearing, your and your neighbor's thoughts on that zone change.
Okay, and that's about all we can do?
For
Should
that
we-
property, yeah.
Should we write letters then?
Yeah.
Okay,
Sure.
great, thanks.
You'll get another notice when the public hearing is scheduled.
Okay.
Any additional comments or questions from zoning commission members, people on the telephone, Zoom, whatever else we have going here? No, I think we can move to the next section.
Okay.
Interesting buffer though.
The next two zone districts are two zone districts that we made from the community commercial zone, and some from neighborhood commercial, depending on the uses. So those are corridor mixed use 1. This zone district is meant to encompass those smaller corridor parcels along major transportation corridors, either Broadwater Central, Main Street, Grand Avenue. They're not very deep, and they usually share a property line or an alley with a residential neighborhood. So this district is meant to have uses that are not going to have a big impact on those adjacent residential neighborhoods, and in fact would support neighborhood services for those folks. And so those are walkable places, but also drivable. And these were mapped. If you look at the online map, you'll see that many of those corridor mixed use 1 districts are lined up on our older arterials like Broadwater that share the alley with the residential neighborhood. So we carved out a bunch of uses we thought would fit in with that zone district. And we also put in those form district requirements for new buildings, not for existing, for new buildings, to bring those buildings closer to the street, to load the parking in the back or on the side, and make it frame those corridors as they get redeveloped over time. Then the corridor mixed use 2 is a district we created to reflect these large developments that have generally streets all the way around them, or they're not adjacent directly to residential zones. They tend to be much larger. They have multiple buildings on them. This is West Park Plaza, and this has multiple uses on the property. It doesn't necessarily have mixed use in the same building, but it has a mixed use horizontally across the property. This zone district corridor mixed use 2 would be for the Shiloh Commons that was recently developed, that has ground floor retail and shops and services, and then upper story residential apartments. So this is that type of zone district. It also has for new buildings, to bring those buildings to the street. The buildings can be larger than in corridor mixed use 1. Still pushing the parking to the side and the back wherever possible, but the corridor mixed use 2 is intended to fit these types of developments where we have them and where we know we're going to have them. So I'd be happy to take any questions on these two zones.
Questions from zoning commission members first?
I have a question. So pushing the parking to the back, while I understand that, and pushing the buildings to the front, I feel like those alleys then need to be paved, because that will be sort of disruptive to the residential houses, like that border Alderson and, you know, Custer kind of thing. Have you given any thought to that? I mean, all that traffic coming down the alley then for Grand and Broadwater could be disruptive to the neighborhoods.
All right, well, if you, okay, I'm in 27400, and each district has its own couple pages and diagrams that show you how that parking and site design is going to work. And this one, okay, the pages are all stuck together. So you see that is on, it's section 27406.
Yep.
So parking siting is the second set of rows in that table. So rear, internal, and side. So where those parking can be located. And then the driveway access refers you to the parking section. But basically, you can enter from the front of, so a lot of places on Grand have 60 feet lot width, or 50 feet, some of them, and they each have a drive approach,
Right.
right? So if
Right.
you go in and you buy one of those lots that has all the parking that's possible is in the front, and it just comes off a short little drive approach, and you park right up against the building. So really all you're seeing from the street is cars. So if you scrape that lot and start over, you just use the same drive approach, but the drive approach goes around the back of the building, and the building comes to the front.
So Nicole.
So you don't have to take your access off the alley.
That would be, well, like Harvest Montana or Great Harvest or whatever, that Harvest on 9th and Grand, they have a front approach, and then they also connect to the alley. So, I mean, there's a lot of traffic, especially with Starbucks and stuff going up and down that alley there
Right,
with that front approach and the back approach. That's all.
right, yeah. Yeah, so we're gonna have to be real careful about that.
Mm-hmm.
The city code right now allows employee parking off the alley for businesses that have arterial frontage, but not customer access from the alley. And I think we kept that in the parking code, so that, you know, we're not forcing all the traffic off the main street onto an alley in the side street for parking purposes.
Okay.
Two places.
Okay. It is.
But we
It's
wanted,
tricky.
we wanted to get parking.
Any additional questions from zoning commission members? Anyone in attendance would like to comment or ask a question on this section?
Blaine Poplar again. I don't like to be a pill about this, so I'm fully supportive of you guys, but I do have another question. And it's regarding this parking in the rear. And it's not only in these mixed-use commercial zones, but it's also in the residential and the multifamily applications. Everybody's gonna have to park in the rear now. So now you've got your business located on Grand Avenue. In the front, I imagine there's still a sidewalk that you'll have to maintain. And then you'll have to probably have your main entrance to your establishment in the back. You won't have a front door to the business. You know, that's just runs so contrary to what we're all used to. And, you know, Montana's kind of known for, we want to pull up in the front of the building and park right there. So you're going to have existing buildings with front parking lots and front entrances. And say you do scrape the building and build your new building, but your neighbors on either side are still going to be front parked and look like they're open, and you're going to be sitting there and you don't even have a front door.
You have to have a front door.
You have to.
What would you use it for? To get to your car and walk around the whole building?
Well, you have to look at the diagrams.
Well, okay, and I know that, and like I said, I don't mean to be
I can kinda see
argumentative, I'm not gonna argue, but I just wanna
Sure.
comment that it's gonna be difficult for people to adjust to this front with no parking.
I can see that.
Be it residential or be it commercial, it just goes against the grain. Thank you, that's all I wanted to say.
Great.
I just want to address Blaine's comments, because I do agree that this is going to go against the grain for some time.
A long time, yeah.
But we're already seeing it, particularly in commercial use in some of the newer buildings that are being built. Mike Stocks, that you just brought up earlier, he pulled the buildings all the way up to the Shiloh corridor, put the majority of the parking to the side or underneath the buildings. The new City Vineyard did a pretty decent job of this same thing too. They pulled the building further forward, put the parking on the side and some to the rear. And I think really ultimately, as we begin to have the opportunity to redevelop some of these corridors like Grand Avenue, that seemingly the only surviving businesses that can function there are casinos and things with big flashing signs out on the street. If we can do some things to change that corridor and that built environment by pulling those buildings forward and really starting to address the street, they don't have to just have a back door. And it's not like taking 1010 Grand Avenue where my dad had his first swimming pool store and pulling it forward and then having everybody park in the back, and it makes no sense visually. I think architecturally we're coming up with creative ways like City Vineyard, like the old City Vineyard even, that the T-Mobile store is in over on 17th and whatnot. That's more akin to kind of what you were just alluding to. Like that front door, nobody really uses it because all the parking's in the back. But then when they did their new building just down on Grand a little further, they changed that, and it seems like it really works well. But I do agree with you, Blaine. I think there's going to be some stuff that's going to be a little challenging for people for a bit, but I do think in the long run it's really beneficial for the streetscape and for walkability and community, and so that was my opinion. But,
Thank you.
yeah.
Additional questions or comments? Zoning commission members of the public in attendance, or anyone on the phone? Again, 237-6120. I'm getting to know. I think we can move to the next section.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next one, we're going to jump to the heavy commercial zone district. And this was a piece that we carved out of the community commercial zoning and kind of paired it with some uses from the highway commercial zone. And this zone is really intended for, if you're familiar with the area south of Home Depot off of King Avenue, there's a bunch of contractor buildings back there. They provide business services, but not a lot of retail services. They have big yards where they lay down equipment and supplies. These are the larger warehouse properties that are not industrial warehouses, but just larger warehousing going on. And so that is the intent of the heavy commercial zone district. So where we found these uses and they were in community commercial, we put them in heavy commercial. And where we found these uses in the highway commercial, we put it in the heavy commercial. So it's kind of a blending of those two zones with those uses. So some of the entryway zoning districts were put in the heavy commercial zoning, and some were put in the corridor mixed use too, depending on how those properties were starting to develop. So you'll see a lot of the heavy commercial and the corridor mixed use too together, and kind of in the places where you thought it was, oh, it's all highway commercial. No, now some of it's corridor mixed use too, and some of it's heavy commercial. So, and then, well, let's just stay with that one and see if we have any questions on that particular one. This is more basic zone than the form districts, the mixed use districts. This is going to have basic setbacks and basic lot coverage and basic building heights. It's not, it's not intended to be walkable at all. It's not intended to be close to residences at all, so.
Questions on this section from zoning commission members? comments from people in attendance? Again, to the phones and et cetera, while we're waiting for that, 237-6120. Give it just a second, but I'm not seeing any activity in any direction in terms of questions. So maybe we'll just go to the next section,
Okay.
and if somebody
right.
does call in.
Okay, the next two districts are, as I said at the beginning, are staying very much the same way that they're now constructed. The downtown central business district zone allows many, many uses except for the kind of the auto-heavy uses. So for example, dealerships, RV dealers, manufactured home dealers, any kind of auto-related business that needs a lot of space on the surface is not going to be allowed in the central business district, the same as it is now. So we also looked at some of the kind of the things that were allowed in the central business district that may be a detriment to the district in the future. For example, surface parking lots. Somebody goes in, buys an old derelict building, tears it down, paves it, puts up a bunch of striping and charges however many dollars a day to park there. We're going to make that a special review use in the central business district so that we can keep the street, the frontage, the buildings intact as much as possible. We'll actually encourage and allow parking structures as long as part of that ground floor of the building is activated. So it's not just a blank wall or a blank empty space overnight, which tends to attract people who shouldn't be in there overnight or using that space overnight. So those are a couple of things that we adjusted in the central business district. But for the most part, there's no setbacks, there's no lot coverage limitations, there's no height limits, the same as it exactly is right now. Then the downtown support district is a district that we created out of some of the community commercial zones along 6th Avenue North, North 27th, and the South 27th Street corridor. And we felt these areas that feed directly into downtown or on edges of downtown should have a different zone district that emphasizes the larger or more intense multifamily uses and office and some retail, not a lot of retail. So it's intended to support all of the businesses and the retail services that are already downtown to bring people kind of back to the core, but if they don't want to live right in the central business district. So this is that kind of district. It will have some of those form requirements to bring buildings to the street front. We'll have allowed taller buildings than some of our corridor mixed-use zones. So I believe up to 5 stories we can do in this downtown support district. I gotta pull the code up from the floor, sorry. Just to make sure I'm saying it right.
You're right.
Is it?
Yep.
Okay, all right, good. I remembered. So those are the 2 core districts that form downtown, and then the next district is the area east of downtown. That's the East Billings Urban Renewal District, which is kind of downtown and industrial, kind of a weird mix in there. And we created a form-based district for this 400 acres in 2012, and that is staying exactly as it is. We've kind of pulled apart the section and we put, the uses in the use table, but everything else that's already in the Ebird is staying in its own code section, and that's 27,900. So all of the form requirements, the landscaping, I think we even left the signage in there as it is. well, I'll have to look again. We'll do another session on signage. Don't worry, that's a big topic. We'll spend all night on that. But we're leaving that district intact. So I'd be happy to take any questions on these 3 zones.
Jack has a question. Jack, commission, members of the commission first, Jerry. Just 1 second, we'll let the commission members go first and then.
This is way too broad of a question, but I'm curious if you discussed the issue and what conclusions you may have reached after working downtown for a lot of years, that it's just not a real healthy place. And it's gotten less healthy over the years, and I'm not casting dispersions, that's just my observation of it. Has any of the discussion on the rezone addressed any specific information? Because you got all kinds of data with this building, that building, traffic, parking, blah, blah, blah. So many things. Did anything jump out at you there in the rezone that you think may address part of the issues with the downtown not being what I would think is healthy as it certainly should be, on a number of different scales. Our building, the occupancy has always been very high. I know that that's, we're in Western Security. I know that that's not true of a lot of buildings, and you walk around, you see a lot of empty storefronts, et cetera, empty eyes walking around.
Yeah, yeah. We did have quite a bit of discussion when we were talking about the uses, when we were setting that up. There were some uses that weren't allowed in the downtown district, and I'll give you one example that the Downtown Business Association asked us to add, and that was doggy daycare. A lot of people work downtown, and they want to have their dogs have companionship during the day, and they want to be able to visit their dogs, but it's not an allowed use. There isn't a place close enough downtown for them to like leave at lunch and go and visit. So we added that use specifically at the request of the Downtown Business Association. And we also looked at some of the other issues that are not required downtown now, like for example, if you go into a building and you have gutted the inside of it entirely, and you've built brand new finishes, and you've got, a Class A rating in your building, and you're filling it up with people, nothing in the code requires you to touch anything of the public space around your building. So if you have 10 empty tree grates on your sidewalk, nothing in our code says you have to do anything with that. And so we adjusted that and said, if you're going to go in and do that level of improvement, you're going to have to do something about your street frontage landscaping. You're going to have to fill those tree holes that are empty. And the Downtown Business Association was also very supportive of that. I know we talked with CTA and Dan Brooks a little bit. We were kind of far along in the process, but about crime prevention through environmental design. So when we're looking at new buildings or new uses downtown, how do we make sure we don't create hiding places? That we get light into areas that need light all the time for safety and for health. So that's a discussion we're going to keep going, but we couldn't build it into this zone change right now. But I think we have some pretty good foundation to work from.
I really appreciate that feedback, and that sounds very positive. My only comment, and it sounds a little unctuous, but it's not intended that way, is that I think Billings in a lot of ways is unique. In like our building, most of the people in our building do very little work in Montana, much less service downtown or anything else. It's a place was at one time near banking, was near post office, was near lunches, was near whatever, each other. And I don't know what that means, but I'm not sure that the Downtown Business Association or whoever really grasps what's going on in some of those buildings above the main level. And it sounds like, with your feedback, that every one of those addresses those issues. The comment that I would make is, the nicer your building gets, does the taxes go up on the assessment? So if you've got, I'm guessing that's true. So if you have a crappy building sitting there for years and years and years, your taxes goes down. That seems upside down to me when you're trying to improve the whole area.
Mhm. Yeah, it is. We see that actually in neighborhoods as well, where people have hanging on to a house but nobody lives there, and it just deteriorates, and they pay less and less taxes. So,
It might be, I don't know if we have any authority over that, but it might be something to put in the back of somebody's notes to consider, that there's a punitive relationship there if you're not going to keep your property up, if you're not going to keep it clean, if you're not going to fix the broken windows, if you're not going to rent it, then you're not rewarded.
right. Yeah. Don't disagree.
Additional questions or comments from zoning commission members? Nicole, the last group you talked about, was it downtown support, or what was the definition of?
The definition of downtown support district?
And that's just the areas, that's the South 27th, that's the
North 27th,
North 27th.
and then along 6th.
Okay. So I just have a comment. I've been spending a fair amount of time down in Denver lately. I grew up, I went to high school in Denver, and I remember the downtown in Denver, and that would be the definition of unhealthy at the time that I was there in the 70s. That same area, which was an area where you were clearly, I mean, you just didn't go. You did not go there after dark, period. That area now has seen just an incredible resurgence. And I think one of the main reasons is that it isn't what's in that area, it's what's close to it. And that's high-end, attractive apartment living. My wife and I at one point lived behind the Albertsons here downtown on 27th and the townhomes there.
Yeah.
So we weren't in downtown, but we were close to downtown. We loved it. I almost bought the place. I didn't. Decided to move to Josephine Crossing instead. But that lifestyle of not being in the core, but being close enough where we were able to walk down to downtown, that's what I think really turned around that area and started bringing in other stuff. So having the ability to put in a 4 or 5 story apartment complex, you look at what's going on out at Shiloh, and you take that same idea and put it
Downtown.
within the downtown area, and I think you would have a pretty hot product. That creates people down here then to actually generate something downtown. But, I think that housing issue or having that population is, that to me is the most attractive part of what you've presented tonight, allowing some of those uses.
And I would speak to that as well. I have a couple clients now who have been looking for high-end upper stuff close to downtown, and it's very difficult to find, yeah.
Anyone, members of the public here, President Jerry, you were going to make a comment?
Jerry raised my name. I got a question on this Ebird, Nicole. I suppose you've all figured out, you look at all the parking down there, every driveway is covered with cars 5 days a week. So you leave your home, you can't get back till after 5. But it doesn't take long to figure out, you need 2-hour signs, 2-hour parking. And along with that, they need to lighten up, and I don't know where you're at now with parking, because there's a lot of them old junkers would turn them yards into parking lots. And the people would start parking in them, rather than go up against a 2-hour parking meter. I got a parking lot down there, and they'll walk for 3 or 4 blocks instead of coming to it. And that's because of the 2-hour. If you look at the situation for years, where the federal building is, there was 2-hour parking all around it. If they didn't have the 2-hour parking, where would they have been for parking? So that same thing holds true. Question for you, Nicole. What is the Ebird, or where they at on now? If I own a little property down there and I want to put a parking deal there, they're going to do like they did before. We got to have all this landscaping and trees and stuff. Not interested in that. So can you bring us up to date?
Well, the Ebird code for landscaping and the uses is staying the same. We didn't, the working group and the steering committee believed that that was the appropriate zone for that area. And it's the newest part of our code. And it was based on a master plan that was adopted by the city. And we just left that intact as much as possible.
Well, that code that you're talking about should have business owners like myself and many property owners involved with making that decision. We need to bring it back to that
In
decision.
2012, they were. Every single
We're
one of them was
2020, we
notified.
need to do it now, because what you're talking about didn't work. They were gonna put me in jail because I got a parking lot and I went ahead and done it anyway. But not everybody thinks like I do. So how can we get this here to a person that owns one of them old junkers down there, can turn the yard into a parking lot?
I'm not sure I understand your question. How do we get somebody to remove junk?
What I'm trying to say is we need to have this code simple. So if people want to do a parking lot, they can do it without going through so many shrubs per feet and drainages and all of the BS that goes with it.
Well, that's not the case anywhere in the city. You can't just throw a parking lot in and not do anything to make it fit in.
Well, so you got a situation then with a bunch of old junk houses with yards that look the same, and there hasn't been anything happening, and there won't be. So you got no place. If you drive through that area, the Ebird, what's it supposed to do? It's supposed to be, what have they got? Lights that to me look like cobwebs. I got $20,000 in lights on my property. As if that's gonna get people to run down there and wanna be there. We need to have this zone changed for like that Ebird, where people can go ahead and do what they wanna do, and it'll work out just fine. That's what we need to find out, how we can do that.
So noted.
Thank you.
Additional comments from members of the public who are currently present? Anyone on the phones? Oh, Lane's coming up again.
Blaine Poplar again, sorry. Just a couple of questions. So, the DX, the Downtown Support Neighborhood, did you say that it does run down to South 27th or not?
It does.
It does, okay, like clear down to State or to the interchange?
Where it's currently zoned, where that South 27th Street district exists, that's where it'll be shown on the map.
Okay, so I guess my question is, currently in the Central Business District zoning, I don't think there's any height restriction. Am I right on that?
That's correct.
So you could build a 20-story building if you chose.
Right, in central business.
And then, so in the DX support zoning, did you say you're thinking about a 5-story?
That's what's listed.
Yeah, 5-story would be the maximum.
Okay,
Right now, the community commercial zone is 45 feet,
right.
and the South 27th Street corridor, I believe, is 40 feet. So they have numerical
Right.
limits, not story limits, and we replaced that with stories. Because building code expands the ceiling to floor ratio a lot to meet all kinds of codes. So we put a numerical limit on that in 1972, and now you can barely get a 3-story building in 40 feet.
Right. Has anybody talked about or proposed like a true high-rise apartment building since they built Rocky Plaza? Anybody heard?
More than 5? Well, there was one for downtown that Harrison Fagg proposed. That didn't happen, no.
Okay, thank you.
To that effect, I would say the property at 13th and Pauley, or whatever that is, 12th and Pauley.
Rocky Plaza.
14th, yeah, Rocky Plaza, that's always well sought after, so.
You know, I did a little analysis on that building, and when those go vacant, they sell very
They
fast.
sell very fast, yeah.
Surprises,
People-
yeah, it surprises me nobody else has done that.
Well, it surprises me too. But, I don't know, somebody will have to start it out.
I don't know how to go that high.
Opportunity. Any other comment from any particular format whatsoever? 237-6120 again, no calls, nothing in the other medium. Let's go ahead with the next section.
Okay, my computer froze. Hold on a minute. Okay, so we're moving on. We have controlled industrial and heavy industrial now. We changed their names to light industrial and heavy industrial, but these are essentially staying the same as they are now. These are basic zone districts with uses and setbacks, a maximum lot coverages. The industrial zone districts are found in section 27-600, and all the uses are in the table at 27-1000. But you'll see that, you know, there's not a lot of requirements for either of these zones as far as site development. We are going to, at a minimum, require in both of these zone districts that street frontage landscape be put in when they're developed. Right now, heavy industrial has no landscaping requirement whatsoever. A lot of times we find the heavy industrial and the light industrial directly adjacent to each other, where one has to do something and the next guy down the street doesn't, and it doesn't make really any sense. So the street frontage landscaping, we had a landscaping working group, and they said that was important everywhere. Didn't matter to them whether it was heavy industrial or light industrial. The street front was important. So that as a minimum landscaping requirement. So those are not changing very much. We did change the public zone districts, as I said at the beginning. We have one public zone district that covers everything from open space to landfills, to airports, to Metro Park, to churches and schools and all kinds of things. So we thought, let's make this more understandable and predictable. And so we created 3 out of 1. So public 1 is for open space and for passive or active recreation areas. So your golf course would be a public 1, as well as Pioneer Park or Alkali Park, which is more, hiking trail, that sort of thing. So it covers all of the different kinds of open space and recreational activities in one zone district. And then the public 2 zone district is meant for small 1 or 2 building, civic, educational, or assembly spaces in the community. And this is churches, schools, elementary school, high school. And when you start to get more than 2 buildings, though, we thought that is a different animal. That's a different thing. That's a group. That's really becoming a campus. It's no longer just a one parcel in a neighborhood. It's a campus. And so we created the next step up from there, the campus public 3 district. And the campus can be either for educational, medical, or civic. So we don't have very many places that are in this public 3 zone, and I can name them all. Metro Park, Rocky Mountain College, MSU Billings. The medical corridor area is a campus of medical facilities. It could have many, many owners, but it's all one set of uses that works together. The Catholic school campus at Woody and Colton. And there's one more. I'll think of it. But this is really reserved and intended and created for those big campuses that can have many different types of uses, but also have edges. So within that public 3 zone district, we said, okay, on your edge, where you're facing across the street or across an alley to these other zone districts, you need to mirror those requirements, at least for the first 150 feet of your campus. So that you're not kind of like being campus all the way up to the edge, you know, with your 5-story or 10-story hospital. But you bring it to the neighborhood in a more, in a gentle way. So we took that from the medical corridor requirements and from some of our other zone districts that required similar building heights and to mirror across streets. So that's how we built the public 3 campus zone district. And this is essentially the end of my presentation, so we might as well take comments for these zone districts.
Comments or questions from zoning commission members?
I don't have any.
I had a quick question. There's that section out by Shiloh King, which is sort of advertising itself or looking at kind of a medical campus type
Right.
environment. Would that be, is that a public 3 example, or is that covered on some other?
No, that is a planned development zone.
Okay.
So it's this customized zone district that St. Vincent's did with the city. And they have a commercial corner right there.
Mhm.
And then the rest of it is supposed to be medically oriented businesses. So a couple of dentists have gone out there already. We've got REI and somebody else at the
The
corner.
dialysis
Yeah. Yeah.
business is out there.
Right, so the planned development zones will continue on, all the existing ones. We will archive the existing zoning regulations because some of those planned developments name zone districts that are in our current code as underlying zones. So we'll archive our existing zoning districts and regulations and refer back to those when needed for those planned development zones.
Comments from anyone in attendance tonight? And at the same time, call once more for any phone call, 237-6120. Anyone else that wants to comment? And we'll just give that a few minutes.
Like, well, we've got some dead air. Coorsville didn't hurt that development downtown either.
That helped tremendously.
So if you could bring the Rockies up, kick things off pretty nice.
If we could just save the Mustangs,
Saving the Mustangs would be nice.
that wouldn't hurt either. But yeah, that development was clearly. Okay, I am not hearing anyone in any medium
All
that
right.
has an interest, and so I think we are concluded for the evening.
You are, Mr. Chairman, and I will be in touch in the next couple of weeks to look for future dates when we can all get together and do this again. For signs, parking, landscaping, administrative procedures, and the map. So we will continue with the County Zoning Commission. I'll get them started off in August. So I'll be looking for some dates in September
Okay.
from you.
Nicole, a question.
Yep.
Are we gonna have to do uses too?
Well, we've kind of been doing uses as we go along. We could do a whole,
Well, we haven't specifically gone through the use tables, so I just
No.
didn't know if,
we could certainly incorporate that as far as, you know,
I don't
As-
want to.
you don't want to.
You had to listen to me for a year, go, oh, uses, what? So, but I'm just saying, like, I didn't know
Right.
if,
Well, some of those uses, special uses like casinos, bars, restaurants, and micro breweries, we're gonna cover those as special topics in commercial zones. So kind of the ones that stood out in everyone's mind as we were going through those uses. But the use standards and the use table, it's kind of the place where we spent a lot of time. It's 83 pages, but a lot of it is, there's pictures, and the table isn't that many pages, whereas the table right now is 62 pages. The new table is only 9. We consolidated and kind of made them into categories. So we didn't, you know, we didn't kind of slice our way into a corner, so to speak. But the use standards for all the different uses, from alternative energy generation to cell towers, to bars, casinos, to all the other uses that have special conditions or limitations in that use table are all in there. Sure.
I have a question. I've been asked, first of all, about tiny homes, like where can somebody buy, take in 10 acres or 5 acres and build a tiny home spot where people can drag their tiny home in and hook up to,
It's a campground.
well, so that's
you
in.
can do it
yeah.
as a campground because those are not considered structures
Okay,
under building code.
okay.
So you would do it as a campground if that's what you're talking about.
Okay, and then the other question was, or the other comment I have is that I'm starting to see on MLS data sheets that realtors are advertising that, you know, this property would accommodate an accessory dwelling unit, so in the new code. So I'm starting to see those sorts of comments. So
that's interesting.
interesting, which I don't know that people really realize that it really needs to be owner occupied in order to do that.
Right.
And so, will there be any availability where somebody could add a second house, whether it was, if it wasn't, like especially in N1 and N2,
Yep.
they could add a second house even though they were not going to be owner occupied?
Oh, they'd have to own
Yeah,
it.
the N1 and N2 zone districts both allow single and 2 units.
2 units. Okay,
Oh, right.
so, yeah, so
If it
they
wasn't-
could do that even if they aren't owner occupied?
Yeah,
Right, okay,
yeah, there would just be 2
Just to clarify.
principal dwellings.
right, okay.
But it couldn't be more.
It
because
couldn't
it
be
only
3.
Right, right.
Because they-
Not 3.
No, but people are looking at those larger, you know, those lots that are 7,000, 8,000, and these little tiny houses.
Yeah.
And then you could build something off the alley.
Off
or-
the alley.
Yeah.
So another, just quick question on some housekeeping.
Sure.
Do we have a regular zoning commission meeting in
You
August?
will on August
Yes.
4th. We'll have 2 zone changes and 2 special reviews.
And
Okay.
are we sticking with the Zoom format, or are we trying to go?
We're gonna stick with Zoom, I
Okay.
think. We would have to use this room. We can't use our meeting room unless we just go in that meeting room and nobody else. So
Okay.
it would have to be, I think we're gonna stay with Zoom for now.
Okay. So in that case, I will not physically be here, but I will be able to connect via Zoom.
Okay, good.
Okay.
All right.
All right, that'll work.
Thank you.
Okay.
We had someone new just come in.
Oh.
Hello.
I'm sorry, we were about to adjourn.
Oh, I figured I just couldn't make it till now.
Oh. Was there a particular section you were interested in or question? Or
There
anything?
was the short-term rental section. Is that tonight?
That was last night.
Oh, okay, I couldn't come last night either. Yeah. Okay.
The meeting was recorded, so if you go to Community 7 TV to their Facebook page, you can watch the recording, right?
Okay.
And Spencer Stone was here last night. He represented you well.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay. With that, the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you
Thank
very much.
you.
Mr. Chairman.